Now, Kemi Badenoch today in committee room in the House of Commons, and she, of course, has decided that we're not going to get rid of thousands of EU laws. We're just going to get rid of a few hundred, most of which actually are completely defunct anyway. And David Jones MP, Richard Drax MP, they were not happy.
My view is that what we want to do is get rid of laws that we don't need, and there is a process for that. It is not the bonfire of regulations. We are not arsonists. I'm certainly not an arsonist. I'm a conservative. I don't think a bonfire of regulations is what we wanted. What we wanted was reform and removal of things that we did not need.
Isn't it the case that a bonfire of unnecessary regulations is precisely what the Commons voted for?
I don't think so. And I think sometimes what we voted for was getting rid of regulation that we don't need.
Yes.
And that's what is happening.
Yes, but to that extent, what the Commons voted for was a bonfire of unnecessary regulations, to get rid of all those unnecessary regulations.
I'm joined by Sir John Redwood, Conservative Member of Parliament for Wokingham. John, the use of the word arsonist. Now, you know, it's quite interesting. You know, I thought Kemi Badenoch was sort of one of us on the Brexit side of the argument, and she's basically saying that people like you are arsonists, which means, well, highly irresponsible would be a nice way of putting it. Why is she behaving like this?
I've no idea. I don't understand what her thinking is, and I don't think we're much clearer this evening, because what we have been saying for several years is there are quite a lot of European laws that were imposed upon us where the UK didn't want them or tried to dilute them or water them down. And there are some laws that clearly need modernising or changing because the world has moved on. Indeed, the EU is revising some of them. We're not always even catching up with that. And so we want a proper audit and review. They've had 7 years now to get on with that. We've given them plenty of ideas on laws that could be removed, improved, changed, amended. And they're not doing it fast enough. There's been some progress, but not nearly enough. And then to be presented with a whole package of laws that are going to go when most of them don't apply to Britain, or they're out of date. Or
they're defunct, most of them, aren't they?
It doesn't make any difference to anything. We wanted to be in charge of our own laws. Some need improving, making stronger or better. Others need dropping altogether. Others need more flexibility inserted in them. I mean, for example, VAT is one that I've always been very keen to change, because that was a tax imposed by the EU, and they limited what we had to levy it on, and they limited the rates. They nearly always wanted to levy it on more things than we wanted to levy it on, and have higher rates than we wanted. And an obvious thing to do at the moment, when we need some growth, and we need to say to smaller businesses, we're on your side, raise the VAT threshold, because we had to keep that to 85,000.
Yes, and we could have removed the 5% on household fuel.
Take it off fuel, yes, absolutely.
But John, you
these
know,
are no-brainers. You know?
But here's the problem. You know, you and I both know what we believe in. We're perfectly clear. Well, not just in the referendum, but the years running up to the referendum, where we stood and why we stood there. We've got a government that went to the country in December 2019 saying, we understand, we get it. We finally, we get it. Get a thumping great majority of 80, and now I think they are really dashing the expectations of most Brexit voters. David Jones made the point there that, you know, this is what Parliament voted for and you're not doing it. Well, hang on a second. What about what the country voted for? Because, you know, yes, constitutionally we've left. I'm delighted we've reversed the status quo. I'm pleased.
And that was a big win, and that needed to.
It was a big win.
The other members of that previous Parliament were trying to stop that, and they blocked it.
That was a big win.
Mercilessly for a long time.
It happened in the end.
Yeah, and we got there.
You did take a bit of encouragement on the way, but we did get there.
Well, I didn't. I was always
No, I know you didn't. But it's not you I'm talking about here. It's your blooming government I'm talking about here. And yes, we've done that. Yes, we're standing taller in the world. We have much more independence in terms of foreign policy. Export numbers aren't too bad. The City of London's not...
Well, services are fantastic.
Services doing...
And, of course, services were the thing that the EU would never fight for and never include in their trade deals. And then we go and get a trans-Pacific trade deal, and services are an important part of that.
Those are the positives. But the negatives are this. We would never have got that Brexit vote over the line in that referendum, and the Conservatives would not have had an 80-seat majority if there had not been realistic expectations that small businesses would have the excessive burden of millions of them lifted off their backs. The government, frankly, I think what she's done today, and in using that rather abusive language against those of us that want to remove these regulations, I frankly view that as betrayal. And you know as well as I do, there was that working class Labour vote. Labour, they became quite UKIP-y for a bit. They voted Brexit. Many voted Conservative last time. They wanted immigration numbers to come down. They are now out of control in a way that would have been unimaginable when you were first in Parliament. And I genuinely feel that a huge number of Brexit voters feel it's not working. This government has failed the expectations of those Brexit voters.
Well, I think there's certainly room for a lot of improvement and change. I mean, I think it's very good news that we're not accepting all the liabilities of the big EU expenditure programmes, where they're now borrowing on EU accounts. So tens of billions of pounds, which would have been down to Britain, is not going to be a debt burden on ourselves and our children and grandchildren. And it's great news we got the first vaccine, and it's great news we can do our own
I
trading.
get there are positives.
There are positives. But you're absolutely right. There's so much more opportunity. And I've been going hoarse explaining this to the government, just as you have through your excellent show. And they're easy wins. This is what I don't understand. I say to the Prime Minister, I say to the Business Secretary, these are popular things. These are things which would liberate. These are things which would make us more prosperous. What is the problem?
Could it be that this so-called Conservative government actually now is very much a globalist government? You've got certainly Jeremy Hunt there as Chancellor. Nearly all of Sunak's instincts are that the state should be bigger, the state should do more, that your party's taken the tax burden to the highest level in 71 years. And even if you look at the way in which government expenditure as part of GDP rocketed during the pandemic, it hasn't gone back down to where it was before by any means. But I return to this main point of mine. It was reducing the numbers coming into Britain that got a lot of people out there to vote for Brexit and an 80-seat majority. 1.2 million people legally settled in Britain last year. Does this government not care?
Well, on the contrary, and the Prime Minister has made it one of his big 5 aims. He says he's going to stop the small boats, or sooner the better.
He's not, is he?
Well, I think he's going to have a good go.
You know he's not.
You and I know that the legal migration is the really big numbers, and there is an argument going on within government about that. I think they do have to accept that the legal migration numbers are far too big, and we need to get off this model of inviting people in to do very low-paid jobs and often invite them in at a discount to the current low wages.
John, this is nearly 7 years after the vote.
That is something they can do and should do, because we obviously have potential control of our borders, because we don't have to accept freedom of movement anymore. And the other problem is that all the parties of the left would make it worse, because they're always telling us we don't let enough people in.
So, I am really bored with hearing Labour would be worse. You may well be right.
Well, I am right.
You may well be right. Yeah. But, I mean, I put it to you that many millions of Brexiteers are feeling betrayed by this government. Are they right?
Well, that's your language, not mine. No, I think they're feeling that we could do a lot more, and they want us to do more, and they're telling us through the polls that we need to improve our game, and that's what I'm trying to get the government to do. I mean, on this issue of migration, I remember when I was Margaret Thatcher's principal policy advisor in her middle years, we were running with 50,000 a year. And some people thought that was too much. And we said, no, you need some. You need to invite talent in and so forth. And you need to take some asylum seekers. And then it went to 250,000 under the Labour government. Now, suddenly, it's 500,000 plus on the net basis.
I tell you what.
And I think the government does accept that that is far too many. And they would say that, well, of course, there's special cases with Ukraine and Hong Kong, which is a fair point. But we now need to see that those special cases are through the system, and you then expect to see a good reduction, and that's what we want
and now students come in and bring dependents and all sorts of madness.
Well, they're trying to stop that, I believe, and I think that's very necessary. That's over 100,000
But they've allowed it to happen. This has all happened. Students being allowed to bring in dependents, and those students to work for a further 2 years after they've graduated. This has all happened under Conservative governments. And I put it to you, that if they don't turn this around almost immediately, it's going to be a 97-style wipeout.
Well, I don't agree with that. I will be fighting that election, and I don't spend my time commenting on elections I'm going to fight.
No,
you
fair
need,
dues,
you
fair
need to
dues.
go to independent
Fair
commentators.
dues.
I want to win it.
But all I'm trying to express
one of my
to you-
cases will be, as will my parties, that the parties of the left, who are the ones in contention,
I'm bored with that.
will make this far worse.
Right.
And that this government is serious about controlling migration. And as you rightly say, you're going to want some proof of that by the time we get to the election. I don't think that's an unfair point at all.
I've never doubted, Sir John Redwood, your sincerity or your beliefs for one moment, but I have to say, folks, I do rather doubt it in what is supposed to be a Conservative government. And frankly, the message of, we know we're rubbish, but the other lot of worse doesn't do much for me.